Hello, race fans. It's Peter Partee from Partee Racing. I'm here today in our conference room at Partee Racing in Dan Vegas, Virginia, with Chris Knerr, our lead designer and assistant engine builder. And today we wanted to answer, first and foremost, the question of what is an engine rebuild? Mm-hmm. And it's a legitimate question, right, Chris?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I was honestly, the nomenclature that we used originally is a little bit unorthodox in my opinion. Like what Peter calls a better than stock engine, I would call like a fully built race engine that you're going to put a bunch of boost through. You know, like
and I would call that the lowest quality build that we do.
Right. So like the S65 better than stock, which we've renamed that stuff. We've got new nomenclature for it all. It's a fully forged rotating assembly with Carrillo rods. Like that's to me, to call that better than stock is like insane, but you know, everybody's got different perspectives.
I've been accused of a lot worse.
So what I kind of want to get into here is, first of all, like what is a rebuild, and then like why do we choose the things that we do?
Sure. So legitimate question, right? You can go on eBay and find an S62, S65 rebuild for like $8,000 bucks, right? Now, what you'll notice in the fine print, right, is that it doesn't include piston rings, doesn't include, they reuse gaskets. Yeah. It's all sorts of insane stuff that no responsible engine builder would ever do. Yeah. And then when you pump up the price to include new versions of all that, it's about 12, 14 grand, something like that. And that's still a lot cheaper than what we charge for our, you know, better than stock rebuild, our lowest level of rebuild.
The better than stock S65 is what, 18?
I think it's 17.5, something like that. Yeah, it's about in that range, and that is about as low as we can cut it and still make any kind of money.
And so to use that one as an example, comparing it to the S65 that we see on eBay listed for $8 grand, right, and then up to 12 by the time you've replaced things. What all does that include? Like, so if the cheap option is reusing gaskets, which nobody would ever do, what all does our better than stock?
Well, first of all, we would never reuse a consumable. And gaskets, I don't care if they're multiple, you know, layer steel gaskets, like head gaskets, they can't be reused. They're designed to be compressed once. They're not going to compress the same way the second time, period. Bolts in BMW engines are, the critical ones are stretch bolts. Yeah. They're designed to be stretched a particular way one time. And if you do it more than that, they're not going to stretch and clamp the same way the second time. Right. So the torque spec will not get you to the same place. If the torque spec was supposed to get you a certain amount of clamping force the first time around, you use them again, they're going to get you to a lesser clamping force. And that's a real problem. Right. Especially with mains and head bolts and really critical, and rod bolts, that sort of thing. So no reused bolts, no reused gaskets, everything new. Also, there are 1,000 little parts that go into each of these engines that you don't even know about. Most people don't know dwelling in hollow cams or pressure relief valves for the VANOS. They don't know that in the top of each of the blocks there is a VANOS oil non-return valve. It's a little ball valve, but it's buried in the block. First of all, you better take it out before you clean the block. And second of all, you better replace it if it's not working. And third, there's a little rubber stopper on the top that generally disintegrates. You better replace that so it stays in place when the motor runs. You know, there's little tiny stuff like that. And yeah, you might get away with ignoring it. You might get away with not replacing it, but you might not. And that tiny little part that someone might not know about that's $2 from BMW might blow up your engine. Not with us.
Because we replace all of that. Everything. Without question.
But let's, you know, and then obviously there's a lot of machine work. I mean, all the major components that wear, Chris, are replaced. You know, or they're refurbished. In the heads, we reuse the valves in most cases, because in most cases they're in good shape. We do refurbish them, we check them for straightness, we recut them, etc. But we will reuse them because they're high quality. S54s, we move to Supertech valves because we want to convert to lash caps. But in most cases, that's a kind of thing that we will reuse. The head castings, they're generally very, very good from BMW. So we're not going to use a custom head from somebody, right? What we're going to do is we're going to deck that head. We're going to do a 4-angle valve job on it. We're then going to clearance it for larger cams using a CNC machine. And we're going to port it using a custom program that we outsource to somebody with a Centroid 560 that at some point we will own.
Wow, yeah. So even at the better than stock level, you're getting a ported head?
Not at the better than stock level. Okay. But some people will do a mix, right? Gotcha. They will do better than stock, but they might want to run larger cams later on. And on some of these motors like the S62, you can't run larger cams without having machined the heads to permit larger cam lobes.
Okay, but for argument's sake, let's stay focused on, because we're comparing apples to apples here. Sure. The S65 better than stock package.
Sure.
What happens with the heads on that?
you've got, you're going to get a 4-angle valve job, you're going to get decked. When it comes to all of these motors, even at the better than stock level, we're replacing the valve springs. In the case of the S62, it's just good practice to get you new valve springs. In the case of the S85 and the S65, those things are notoriously defective. We were talking earlier, we have an S85 stroker customer who's got a beautiful E60, had done everything in the way of regular maintenance to it that should be done to an S85, including rod bearings and everything. The one thing he didn't do was replace the valve springs. One of them snapped, motor blew. Now he's in for a stroker. And
our employee Corey has a S65 out back that turned a piston into gravel for the exact same reason.
Really did. It like eliminated the piston.
I mean, it was
an ugly.
Nothing left.
It was an ugly thing. We thought we were going to get to use some of that core, and then didn't really do much.
So the upshot of what we're getting with this S65 better than stock package is you're getting Carrillo rods, Molle power pack pistons, and fully remanufactured heads.
Right.
So that's not even something that gets mentioned on these cheaper builds is the heads. Brother, they're not even getting decked. They're getting thrown back on.
Right. They're not getting decked, and they're sure as hell not getting a 4-angle valve job.
Right.
I mean, and we go through specific angles for specific models to cut them. It usually takes 2 procedures on each valve seat. And, again, this requires a fair amount of surgery. It requires a fair amount of time. And these shops that are selling these motors for $7,000, $8,000, $10,000, I guarantee you they're not touching any of that. And so, we do all of that. We replace the components that we know are defective or that we know need to be replaced. And then you were talking about the bottom end.
Yeah, so I kind of do want to have you answer a couple questions about that. I've got a stock S65/85 rod here.
Right.
And then I've got what we use. This is the power pack piston and the Carrillo rod. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to deciding that that's what we're going to use?
First of all, the Carrillo rods, which is what we have here for the S65, are 50 grams lighter than the stock version. 50 grams.
That is, on a V10, you're talking half a kilo.
Right. I mean, this is a huge amount in the machine world. The 50 grams per rod, and that's before we account for the lighter weight pistons, means there is less reciprocating weight. That means the engine is going to rev more freely. That means it's going to operate with less heat, with less friction, and with less pressure on those ever so tender rod bearings. And main bearings in the case of the S65. And so, I mean, all of that is better. Lighter, stronger, less friction, less heat. That's what you get for this. And in all candor, by comparison to some of the pistons that we use for like the custom ones on the S62, because these aren't available for the S62, they're relatively inexpensive. That's why our low-end S65 build is actually cheaper than our low-end S62 build, because you can get Molle power pack pistons available for the S65 right off the shelf. And they're good. They're not as high quality as custom pistons for the S65, but they're very good. And they're Alusil compatible.
S62 pistons here, Peter.
I'll
just grab that for you. So what is it about the S62 piston that's so special?
Sure. The S62 piston that we have custom made for us by JE is a beautiful example of what we call an asymmetric piston with offset wrist pins. The wrist pins are offset to the thrust side of the piston. What is the thrust side? That is the side that is, in this case, being pulled down when the piston is being pulled down and it kicks up the back side of the piston, okay? That is the thrust side of the piston. So on this side, it's on the exhaust side. On bank 2, it's on the intake side. And each of the JE pistons have a larger skirt on the thrust side and a smaller skirt on the minor side. Why? Because you don't need that extra skirt on the minor side to prevent piston rock and its gratuitous weight. In addition, again, we have offset. It's offset to the thrust side. And that with a 90-degree V8, what that does is provide much smoother operation. There are plenty of aftermarket pistons out there you can buy off the shelf for the S62. Pay extra for the Alusil coating that they have to be compatible. But they don't have offset wrist pins. And they don't have asymmetric skirts. And I guarantee you they aren't this lightweight. Look at all the carving out of the piston, the area around the pin boss here. That reduces weight dramatically. We also use very high quality tool steel for very thin diameter piston pins that are then DLC coated. Diamond-like coating coated. And that combination of features makes for a very lightweight, very strong piston. And again, this is made out of 2618 alloy, not 4032, which is stock and also what the mollies are made out of. That means these are going to take a lot more of a beating before they blow up. They do expand more, so you have to have more piston to wall clearance. You might at startup hear a little bit more noise. I've never heard anybody complain about it. But the bottom line is, this is what every piston manufacturer uses in like an all-out race motor. And so off-road, it's going to be okay in a really high-power street motor. It also has features like contact reduction grooves in the top here. Why do you need more piston connection to the cylinder wall than is absolutely necessary for piston ring seal? You don't, so you just cut grooves there to minimize the friction. You also have side lateral gas ports that help push pressure under the rings to give you greater ring seal. And there are just lots of little features, and these are not all that extraordinary on contemporary high-end pistons. But when you compare them to stock pistons, they're worlds apart. And in some of our cases, we will actually also hard anodize the top ringland, and then all of our pistons are critical tolerance and critical weight matched.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, all of our engines get balanced to like 1 gram or something?
This industry standard, what do we mean by balancing a motor? Let's talk about that. That's one of those machine operations that I guarantee you is skipped by these people charging $7,000 to $8,000. The reciprocating assembly here has to be, every component needs to be weight matched so that each cylinder has the same weight that's flowing in each one as much as possible.
And I mean, the scale that we used for that was what, $2,000?
At least.
Just to measure the pistons and rods?
And we balance this. Industry standard is to balance to within 3 and 5 grams. We balanced within 1 gram. And what that requires is weight matching, where John's going crazy, our machinist, mixing and matching and grinding and getting everything weight matched. And then we use a digital computerized crank balancer that tells you exactly where the crank needs to either have a weight added, or in our case, because we're lightening the reciprocating assembly, where weight needs to be taken out. And again, we found this great technique on, like, for example, S62 cranks, where the heavy Mallory metal that's already inserted into the crank, one can drill into that to reduce the weight necessary to achieve the necessary balance on the ends. It's a very effective and clean way of getting the crank to balance. But again, we do it within 1 gram. What does it mean? That means the engine is going to spin more freely. You take these steps, Chris, you lighten the components, you make them more durable, higher quality, and you balance everything to within 1 gram, and you have the appropriate features like offset wrist pins. You're going to have an engine that runs smoother. It's going to be create less friction, less heat, and it's going to become more durable. So it gives you all the things that our customers are paying extra for. The certainty of knowing they're getting an engine that's going to perform, the certainty of knowing that they're getting an engine that's going to last. Those are the two things. What is the value proposition of a Partee Racing motor? That's it. Certainty as to durability, certainty as to performance. How do we get there? Components and expert machining that is way above industry standards. Full stop. And now, look, just because I can't stop myself, on Alusil motors, aluminum silicone alloy motors, which is what the S65, S85, and S62 are, not the S54, that's cast iron. But on the Alusil motors, they can't just be bored and honed like any other motor. You do that, you're courting disaster. And this is why people will say, oh, you got to sleeve an Alusil motor. No, you don't. And then they'll say, oh, well, you can't hone it because it'll take the coating off.
Alternatively, there are other people who say, well, you can just use this paste and be done with it.
Well, first of all, it's not a coating. The entire block is made of Alusil. You can't hone the coating off. But yes, and then, we had a racer once, Brad Perkins at Chicane Motorsport, great guy, love him to death, long-term customer. And the first S62 he ever built, he said, no, I'm going to re-expose my Alusil myself. And he said, I've got a drill with 3 felt pads on it, and I'm going to use the paste. And he went out there in the backyard, and I don't know how he kept it straight or whatever, and I'm sure he didn't, but the motor ran for a while. I think he got 3 to 6 months out of that motor, and then he sent us the motor and said, okay, now you do it right. Yeah. And then I think he ran that motor outright, and I think he won Grid Life one year and came in second the next. And then the motor still didn't blow that we built him. He just wanted to rebuild it to, make some changes.
Yeah, right.
And that's really great performance for a motor to be raced every weekend or almost every weekend during racing season, again and again and again. And he has it with forced induction, putting 14 PSI through the motor. I think he puts 830 horsepower to the wheels. Yeah. Most people historically would have said, hey, you got to have a sleeved S62 to do that. No, you don't. Yeah. You just have to have a motor that's built and machined correctly.
Right. I was just discussing this with somebody today on one of the forums, and the fact of the matter is when you do it that way and it does work, you get lucky. Because how often do we hear the horror stories from the people who didn't get lucky? Either they went with the shop that was inexperienced with Alusil, and they did just use the paste in a certain amount of time, and that doesn't work. You're guessing. If you don't have a profilometer and you're not going through all the steps and stages that we do, you're guessing. We've done hundreds of these engines at this point, right?
Yes, indeed.
And we nail it every time.
Right. And again, it's the certainty. You might get lucky.
The certainty is the key.
I've had some guys say, yeah, I used that drill in the backyard with the paste, and hey, man, my turbo motor ran for 100,000 miles. Good for you. I'm glad. I'm happy for you that you got away with that. Right. But the chances of you getting away with that are low.
Exactly.
And that's where we bring the value, is we make those almost a near certainty that you're going to get what you want.
Rather than a gamble, it's an investment.
Right. And the question is, when you work on these motors, right, Chris, you were talking about your 335i, just saying you wanted to just pop new pistons in, a new
Years ago, I had a 335i.
Right, before he met me, right, before I got on the straight and narrow.
Now I have an S65. So, years ago I had a 335i, and I had to have the engine rebuilt. And I was on a budget at the time, so I just had the machine shop that I was working with. They threw new piston rings in it, kind of polished up the bores. To be honest, I don't know exactly what they did, if they did anything to it, and threw it all back together. And it ran fine for a little while, and then it started smoking, and then it started having typical N54 problems. And
this replicates itself with Alusil motors. A very prominent YouTuber took his S65 to a well-established shop in Europe, said they'd done hundreds and hundreds of Alusil motors. They knew exactly what to do. S65, and less than 10,000 kilometers later, the motor is not sealing, it's got bad leak down, it's smoking, and you tear it apart, and the cylinder walls are just streaked and destroyed.
Well, he showed the video of it actually being honed to our machinist, and our machinist just watching the video could tell it was wrong.
Like wincing. Yeah. And this is not easy, right? I mean, the problem is that doing this Alusil reconditioning takes time and patience. You have to do it cylinder by cylinder. You do the work, you spray all the crap off with, brake clean, you use your profilometer to see if you get the requisite, roughness specs that we know most people don't. And if you don't, you do it again. Yeah. And only when you get those specs can you move on to the next cylinder. And you're talking about an S85, you're doing that 10 times. It's not quick. Yeah. It's not easy. And so, we take more time, we take more care, we take more effort, we use better components, and what we do is give the customer in exchange more certainty about greater durability and greater performance. Our motors will take whatever you throw at them. Like, Brad's motor, 14 PSI, 835 forced induction. I was like, I don't know, Brad, even our motor, and he did it. And he's got, good aftermarket components and stuff. So, in terms of ECU control and what have you. So, that's a little more than one can reasonably expect. But the bottom line is, if you're going to spend money on these motors, and you spent a fair amount on your 335.
I spent about $10,000 on it.
See, and that's what gets me. I get a lot of people who call and say, why can't I just do, chain guides and VANOS and, chains and tensioners? And look, I should be good to go for 100,000 miles if I do that. Right? Wrong. You might be. You might be. And then you might have spent $10,000 to $14,000 on something that's going to blow up next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you have wasted all that money. Well, if you have our chain guides, then you won't have wasted your money on our chain guides, because ours will be reusable in most cases. So the bottom line is, if you're going to invest that kind of money in a motor, you should spend the additional money necessary to be certain that what you're getting is what you want: durability and performance. And when that spread is $5,000 to $10,000 and you're already spending 10 to 15, to me, it makes absolutely no sense to take the risk to save that 5 to 10 grand.
I agree.
Now, other people just say, yeah, but I don't have it. And if that's the case, I tell them, go buy a junkyard motor.
Yeah.
Put a junkyard motor in. It's a cheaper way to get to the same gamble. Same probability of success. You buy it from Adam Barak, chances are that he's going to, have done a leak down on it and say, looks pretty good. And chances are what you're going to get is pretty good. It might last you 100, 200,000 miles. Who knows?
At least you know that it was running when it came out of the engine.
Right. Whereas, in contrast, if you're working on a motor your own, right, that has had some sort of failure, like our U-shaped guide. I don't know if we have our U-shaped guide in here.
We don't have one in here.
But I mean, when the chain goes around it and the brown plastic craps off, and then the chain starts to ride on the aluminum, that aluminum starts to flow throughout your motor. They say, well, yeah, but we cleaned out the oil pump, and we replaced all the guides, so it's good to go.
Yeah, what about all 10 oil galleys?
Yeah, I mean, you have any idea how many tiny little oil galleries there are in this thing? And how they have little plugs? I mean, there are a zillion 10 millimeter stainless plugs that go in this motor. We take them all out when we clean these things, every single one of them. And then we replace them at the end of the day. If you're not doing that kind of cleaning, you're courting disaster. Those little aluminum and other pellets are stuck in there, and at some point, they're gonna come loose. At some point, they're gonna get between a rod and a bearing, or a journal and a bearing, and you're toast. And then you will have invested a lot of money in a motor that is not gonna withstand, it's not gonna do what you want it to do. It's not gonna last, and it's not gonna perform. That's the value proposition. And there are definitely limits to it, right? The kind of spread that I'm talking about here between like doing chain guides and tensioners and that sort of thing on the one hand, and then a basic rebuild on the other, that's a pretty small spread. Anybody who doesn't do that, I think they're really being foolish. Now, then there are, stage 2 motors, right? Or tier 2 motors is what we're calling them now, right? Chris doesn't like my nomenclature, so we're changing it. Because, of course, whatever Chris wants, Chris gets.
Well, I know best. So.
Of course. But tier 2 motors, they're going to be another $10,000. Why? Because we're getting the ported heads we talked about earlier. We're getting, billet cams from Debilis or Schrick. I mean, these are pretty. These are pieces of art. This is an S65 cam, and I mean, it's beautiful. And these things, along with ported heads and additional compression, will get you a lot of additional horsepower from the S65 in particular. You just throw these on a stock S65, you're going to get some power with good tuning, but not like you will with a little tick up in compression like you get with our mollies. And then you use our custom pistons, you get a little more. Again, these are incremental steps. And you're going to spend another probably 5 to 10 grand for the next tier up, right? And then if you want a real race motor, we can give you one for 40, 50 grand. But nobody really wants that for the street, right? No, 2-ring pistons and dry sumps generally don't go well with the street. But this kind of tier 2 thing, that's a big step up from just, doing chain guides and tensioners and that sort of thing. And so I understand that is really only for somebody who is looking for the very highest end performance on the street. That said, the highest end performance that we achieve on the street is a lot more than what it used to be, right? I mean, we've got basically stock S65s. The only addition made to them are cams, right? And mild port on the exhaust. And they're putting out well over 400 wheel. And maybe with a little bit of special tuning where we do some things that no other tuners do because they don't know how to access the certain aspects of the ECU. But we do, and we take the time to do it. We may actually see more like 410, 415 from that combo. And then, of course, our strokers go well beyond that. You see
honestly, like the numbers that we're approaching with these tier 3 with the built heads. We're expecting to get closer to what 5 years ago strokers were doing.
Exactly. I remember when the first ESS supercharger kit came out for the S62. People were slapping it on, going, "Hey man, I got 450 wheel." I'm sorry. We're doing that naturally aspirated now. We're doing better than that by 10 to 20 wheel horsepower now, naturally aspirated. And oh boy, isn't that better? Right? You don't have boost leaks. You don't have belt slip. You don't have a fan strapped to the front of your motor with parasitic loss. I don't like FI. I certainly don't like centrifugal superchargers. Other ones.
Twin screw loading.
Yeah, stay tuned on that part. But in any event, so as you can tell, I'm a big fan of doing things right, doing it once, and that's what we do here.
Yeah. I think that sums it up, But if anybody, as I say in the forums all the time, we're Partee Racing and we do not compromise.
Chris came up with that, so he's really proud of it. But that's true.
Yeah.
And, if anybody ever has any questions, specific questions about do you do this or do you do that? I mean, I had somebody call me today and say, well, as part of your engine R&R, do you replace coolant hoses? And it's like, we replace everything that needs to be replaced. You pay for the parts, but we're not letting a car out the door unless everything is right.
If it's at all questionable, we're not interested.
Right. And we love to take the cars ourselves. We like to do engine R&R because then that gives us the opportunity to make sure everything is perfect before it goes out the door. But we also will do a long block in, long block out. Ryan Schultz, E39 Source on the West Coast, sends us a lot of work and then does the installations. Trusted shops, George Hill and Austin. Lots of people that we work with to send S62s to, S65s, S85s. They do the installation, they do the tuning, whatever. We can do it however the customer wants. Yeah. But our particular preference, and a lot of people are using it more and more, is just to ship us the car. Yeah. And ironically,
we're kind of running out of space.
We're running a little out of space, and most of our clients are from California. Isn't that funny? So, a lot of people will call and say, hey, we want an engine rebuild. I want to send you the car, but man, I'm too far away, right? Yeah. No. You can send us the motor. We have a designated shipping broker. We know how to pack it. We know how to protect it both in and out with insurance. Never had a problem in that regard. Hell, we've overnighted engines to Australia.
Yeah, I think we have cars from we've had multiple engines from Canada. We've got a car here from Canada. We've got a bunch of cars from California. I think there's a car from Oregon. We've got cars from all over the country.
On the way, yes. Yeah, exactly.
And then one coming from, you're far away is a non-issue for us.
Exactly. If you're close, great. You can drive it down and go home. We have some customers that when we're done with the car, because we're so close to Virginia International Raceway, I'm a member of the VIR club. And so, basically on a VIR club day, we can have guests. We can take a customer's car and, if the customer knows how to drive and has tracked the car before, they can drive their car on Virginia International Raceway to prove it out before they drive it home.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun for everybody, us included, so please do that. It's especially
fun for me because then I get to drive it the way it really should be driven. And, sometimes it makes the client a little nauseous, but, but then they kind of like it. It's just like, wow, you can show them what their car can do. And that is so much fun. That's really what we're in the business of doing, is helping people get what they want out of their cars. Yeah. So with that, we'll sign off.
I agree.
Thanks for your time.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
That's right. Oh yeah, www.parteeracing.com. I always have to throw the www up in because, I'm a boomer.
Don't hesitate.
I'm actually not a boomer. I'm Gen X. So,
Buy stuff.
But Chris says I'm a boomer, so I like to say that.
He is.
Buy stuff. I'm not. I use pens and paper. I'm analog.
Cringe.